focused on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lady K Chat podcast. You are here with your favorite host, Lady K. And for those who are tuning in for the very first time, you already know I am the one that I speak my truth. I don't hold my tongue back, but I speak it with love. And the whole month of March, I have something brewed up on my hand. And I'm going to be real with you guys. I'm so sick of a lot of y'all on the internet. I'm sick of y'all with this gender war. I'm sick of y'all complaining about what the man do. I'm sick of y'all complaining about what the woman do. And I'm here to remind you about the entity of marriage and why it's so powerful and why marriage still works in this time. But today I am not by myself. I have the pleasure of bringing this powerhouse with me tonight. She is not afraid to hold her tongue either. Right, Heidi? You speak your truth.
Come on.
Stuff, and you stand on your ground because I know you are an amazing woman of God. And woman of God, I thank you for joining me today. I want everybody to help me welcome Mrs. Heidi Mercado. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. Hi, Kalima. Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
You?
I am doing great.
I'm sorry, Kai. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Heidi. Yes, Heidi, like I was saying to the audience, so much gender war going on, complaining about one another, within the entity of marriage. But, I wanted to bring someone on today that can share that marriage is beautiful. The entity of marriage is beautiful. So, Heidi, I'm going to allow you to go ahead and just, speak around that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kalima, for having me. So definitely marriage, as you said, it is a beautiful thing. And I know that different people, they're going to have a different perspective on it, right? So I'm going to speak on the perspective as a married woman. And I can tell you that being married is work. Being married, it is a beautiful thing, but it is going to require for two people to not only be committed, but to be dedicated to making it work. And it's every single day. So it's not like you put in the work one day, 1 week, 1 month. It's actually every single day. From the moment your feet hit the floor, you are working on your marriage. You're being intentional with your marriage, because the only way that it can be beautiful is to do what you're supposed to do from your end so that it can be reciprocated. You know what I mean? Because it's not a one, it's a relationship, right? And in every relationship, there has to be two people. So one person can't be the one always doing something. It has to be that there's a mutual exchange in the relationship so that it can be beautiful the way anyone would want it to be. Right. So for me personally, I believe that, and I'll speak definitely on my marriage, that, when I first got married, right? There were so many different things that, you don't know about your spouse when you first get married, right? You learn your spouse, which with every day you learn something new. Like to this day, like we've been married, we're going on like 14, 15 years. And I can tell you that I'm still learning. There's things that I'm learning about my husband. There's things that he's learning about me. And the reason for that is because as individuals that we are constantly evolving. And there's that word that I absolutely love, because we are continuously growing. We're supposed to continue to grow. And when you grow, there can be friction, right? But that doesn't mean that becomes a bad thing. It just means that now we have to make space and room for who we are becoming, right? Mm. And guess what? That takes work. It takes intentionality. It takes effort. It takes dedication. It takes work. And I think some people, when they think about marriage, they think that it's just set there and you just get married and the pieces are going to fall where they may. But that's not what it is, right? Pieces will only fall exactly where you leave them, right? So the only way that in a marriage that we can say it's a beautiful thing is when you have two people that have decided to not only commit to each other, but they have decided to dedicate that space and time for each other and respecting who they are and who they will become, because we won't stay the same. I always tell people, I'm not going to be who I am now in 10 years from now. My husband's not going to be who he is, right? So I have to learn to grow with him so that we don't grow apart. Because as you know, with the rate of divorces, you can easily grow apart from a person, right? And that's why I always tell people I'm not a marriage expert, because, you know, it's only been 14 years, but I can tell you this, that in those 14 years, I've learned what to do, what not to do, how to do it, right? And I continuously learn. I'm still on that boat where I'm learning how to be a better wife, and the same way that he's learning how to be a better husband. And what I love about the marriage, and I love how you defined it. You said it's a beautiful thing, and it is, because when you get to that space that you can see each other and have that openness, that communication factor, right? That's the game changer in marriage, right? Having that communication factor. When you have those components, which are major keys, there's nothing that you can't do in your marriage. There's nothing that you can't overcome. There's nothing that can limit you in that entity of marriage. You know, if we look at it, you know, I'm a faith woman, I love God, right? And if you look at it from the lens of a biblical perspective, right, in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 15, we read that God made Adam, but he made Eve out of Adam, because he said, man, it's not good for man to be alone. So he made man a helpmate. So when we think about the entity of marriage, and one of the things that I heard you say was, you know, marriage is still there, right? It's still something that we should be doing, right? Because so many are saying, well, we don't need to get married. We could shack up and everything's okay. Like, I get to know you, you get to know me, and we can do all these other things, right? But what we need to understand, right, is that you can find out everything about a person and then say, I don't want to get married, right? But what we have done then is given the person all the benefits without the contract, without the covenant, right? But when you go in covenant, because regardless, there's always going to be something that you're going to find in an individual that you're going to say, you know what, I don't like that part. But if you go back to the Garden of Eden, if you go back to when God created man, he didn't put Adam and Eve in the garden and say, well, let me see if they can first figure out if they're a match. Let me see if Adam can just, you know, test her skills and see what she's going to bring to the table. You didn't read about that. You didn't read about, well, Eve is going to see if Adam is a good fit. She's going to test him to see. No, the Bible says he brought them together. After he created Adam and he created Eve out of Adam, he put her with Adam, and he said, now this is flesh of your flesh, bones of your bones, right? That's why he called her woman, because she the womb of the man. So when we think, when you mentioned earlier, you know, I know that there's so many different perspectives on, you know, men and women and what we see, but the man needs the woman the same way that the woman needs the man. God knew what he was doing when he was forming in the garden. He knew to take her out of him. Why? Because it would be him that will cover her. That's why, if you notice, a little girl will always seek the protection of her father. She will always seek the nurturing aspect of a father. She will always seek the covering, the protection of her father. Because the day will come that one day her father is going to give her away to her spouse, her husband. And then what's going to happen is now that husband will protect the wife. This is why the Bible says that, you know, Jesus says in his word, I want the church to, it's in the New Testament where the husband is supposed to treat the wife the way Christ treats the church. And he loved the church, right? He loved the church. So God is saying, I'm putting man there first. Man came first, but he's supposed to be, she may be the helpmate, but he's the protector. So it's the kind of covenant relationship that is needed. It's a union by God. It's an institution by God. The Bible says what God has put together, let no man tear us under, right? So I believe I still believe in the entity of marriage. I believe that it is essential, that is critical, that is important, especially in these times, that we teach on this topic, because it is needed. It's, it's not, let me find out if we're a match. It's God has ordained it this way. This is what it's supposed to be. This is what it's supposed to look like, right? So those are my thoughts on the entity of marriage. I think that it can always be a beautiful thing as long as you make it that, right? You in life, you can only get out of it what you're putting in, and that pertains to marriage. If you're putting in work in your marriage, if you are doing what you're supposed to do as a woman, right, as a spouse, and by the same token, and he's doing what he's supposed to do, you can produce magic. You can produce greatness together. You'll be unstoppable, because that's how God ordained it to be.
Absolutely. I love everything you said, Heidi. You said a mouthful, but the one thing that resonated with me the most is when you said you have to be intentional. And I think people, sometimes they miss that part, or sometimes they get to a certain space in a relationship and they forgot what the promise is. They forgot what the goal is, because something hard came their way. And listen, I understand, like you said in the beginning, it is not peachy. You're going to go through your times. You're going to be tried. And this is not the time for you to say, well, let me see if he's the man for me, because I'm going to go back to this. And this is why I keep saying, before you even consider saying I do, you have to make sure you vet the correct person. And also it goes back to their characteristics, because guess what? Those characteristics is going to be tested within the marriage. Am I hitting it on the head, Heidi?
Yes.
Vetting is so important. And I think that's a lot of hit and miss for a lot of women. And I think this is why people feel like, I don't want to get married. It's because, you're not knowing how to date correctly. So you got to go back from the beginning and make sure that, okay, let me make sure I connect with someone. And it's okay to say if I don't know how to date, because a lot of people really do know how to date. They just know how to go out there and meet people. You know what I'm saying? They don't really know how to love, because they think love is a feeling. Love is a commitment. And that's where people get it twisted. It is a commitment, and you commit and you choose every day that partner, because you are exercising your right. You are exercising that love for that individual. And I understand, we are human beings. And by default, when people do something to us, even the ones that's closest to us, we start looking at them funny. But I have to say this to people: you got to be mindful too. You ain't all that pretty either, because if God exposed you to yourself, you be like, ew, that's me. Yes, it's you. And why am I speaking to you this way? Because I need you to get out your head. Because guess what? We all do the same things, but in different ways. It's so easy for you to pick out and flaunt people's flaws. But if somebody showed it and went through yours, your feelings will be hurt. And I have to go there, because again, these gender wars, it makes no sense. When do you ever get to a point and say, well, you know what? Let's see how we can resolve this. Because like I said from the beginning, conflict resolution skills is a necessity in your marriage. And when you are going through certain things, this is why it's important to have that circle of friends who are already in that entity. Just recently, I was on a show, and I was telling, and the topic was about, knowing what's best for you. And I was saying, well, in this season, what's best for me is to be around people that are married, people who have been married for a long time, because I want to feed off that people, because that's the route where I'm headed. So nothing against the other people, but if I'm headed in this direction, then I need that type of support. You know what I'm saying? Because you're saying this is what I want, because you're getting yourself prepared. But if you're already in it, then you still need those group of people to support you.
Come on.
And if they're not telling you go home and make it right with your spouse, they're the wrong people in your circle. If they're not trying to say, hey, stop acting like that. And I think here's the key thing that a lot of people have to learn along the way, and that's the power of forgiving. Because sometimes once that spouse do that certain things to you, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and then you harbor those feelings. And don't get me wrong, again, you're a human being. You're allowed to feel that way. But I think sometimes where people get stuck from moving on is that you're harboring the hurt that that person gave you. Heidi,
Yes.
have you ever experienced a moment in your marriage where maybe your husband did something hurtful for you, and how did you overcome that? How was you able to get over that hump?
Yeah, wow. I mean, in 15 years, I'll tell you that we've had our share of many disagreements, right? Many moments of we didn't see eye to eye, right? And let me just say this, that when we came into marriage, I came in with 3 children. And the reason I'm sharing that is because oftentimes, a lot of times that we've had our disagreements have more to do with family issues like children than even each other, if that makes sense, as opposed to someone who's getting married and they didn't bring no children in, you know what I mean? So the reason I share that I came in with 3 children is because that also played a role, obviously, in marriage, right? I'm coming in with 3. And then obviously we do have 2 in marriage, right? But, throughout the course of our marriage, we had many, there were things that we didn't always see eye to eye pertaining to raising children, right? I can tell you that there would have been times that, my daughter, she's 25 now, my God, but when she was younger, I would think that it's okay, let's say, for her to go out, or it's okay for her to go to the movie theater with her friends, right? And then my husband would be like, that's not a good idea. I don't think she should be going out. And I'm like, why not? She's a teenager. She can go out. She's going to just go to the movies. But because he's a man, right? A man and a woman see things differently, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but not only differently, but we see things through the lens of our experiences, right? So I look at things a certain way because of my experience. And that's everybody. That's part of everybody's perspective. There's a percentage of everything that you do and say is based on your experience, right? So I make decisions partly on experience, right? So in my mind, because I remember when I was a teenager, I was never allowed to go out. I was never allowed to go to the movie theater. I was not ever allowed to do anything. I grew up in like my mom, and it was a single, my mom was a single mom, and she was very strict. So I was not allowed to hang out with the girls. I was not allowed to sleepovers. That was never the case for me. So when my daughter had asked me, I was like, okay, yeah, because I didn't want to raise her the way I was raised. I wanted her to have some kind of liberty, but not too much liberty. But then that's where my husband, and that's, I think, where we kind of come into to seal a deal, which is where I lack, he has. So he brought in some kind of structure. So I remember that, it wasn't like an argument or anything like that, but it was a disagreement. And the disagreement was, I don't think it's a problem. She can go out. And he was like, well, because she's only, I think she must have been like maybe 14. I don't remember, probably. He was telling me that's not a good idea. She shouldn't be going out, and so forth and so forth. So what I learned from that moment of having that disagreement, which now that I look back, I can say we've gotten into a space where we can actually bring what's taking place to the table, determine why are we upset, why are we arguing, what's the disagreement really about? Let's get to the root of that, right? With me, it's about, I don't have a problem, and I'm going to tell you why. And I told him, I said, I don't want to raise her the way I was raised. But he comes from a different background than I do. So again, here it is. We're looking at things from different lenses. Right. So at that moment, I mean, now we've kind of I'm not going to say we perfected it, right? Because I don't claim to be a perfectionist, anything, but I can say, okay, I think I learned a few little things along the lines, right? But at that moment, what he was just simply trying to say is, this is the reason why it's not a good idea. She's a young girl. She shouldn't be out there by herself, right? And I was looking at it like, well, I want to show her that I can trust her, right? So what we had to do, right? What we had to do was come up with something. We had to come up with something where we can meet somewhere along the lines where I can still respect what he was saying, but I wanted him to respect what I was saying as well. right? So he said, okay, well, let's do this. Let's give her some conditions. And then, if she's okay with the conditions, then I have no problem with her going out. And I said, well, you know what? That works for me. I don't have a problem with that. I want her to still be able to go out, but I also want her to feel that, she's protected and nothing's going to happen to her and so forth. So we had to find a way to meet at a point where I'm giving up something, but I'm not losing everything. Does that make sense? And,
Yes, it
and I
does.
didn't feel as the man of the house, as my husband, that I was dismissing what he was saying. I wanted him to know, I hear you.
Yes.
I believe I understand you, but help me understand the parts that I don't understand. And then by doing that, then maybe we can work something out that we can both walk out of this and still be completely happy and healthy. And that's exactly what it did, to be honest. And I think it took several of those moments like that. And like I said, it mostly always dealt with mostly kids. I have 5, right? When I came into marriage, I brought 3, and then we ended up having 2 together. So everything was always based around family and children. So a lot of our up and downs really centered on children, family things going on. Just, there were times we didn't see eye to eye with things that pertain to, like, let's say school, or something as small as, let's say, my little guy, who's not so little anymore, video games. There were times that I was very strict on certain things that he wasn't strict on. So I was strict on, I don't want my son playing video games that is shooting games. And he was more like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
So those were the kind of disagreements that, and though they may sound small, there were times that it could have gotten, like, out of hand, like, oh my God, like, why can't you just see it the way I see it?
Right.
Because, believe it or not, as women, especially, when you're already a mother, when you've already, been in a relationship, you kind of feel like you have like this sense of power, like, what's right and what's wrong, right? And I'm always that person, or have always been that person. Like, when I know something's wrong, I just kind of stick to it, right? Like, I don't see the area. I'm kind of like black and white person. So I think one of the things that my husband and I, that sometimes that we would have our moments that we didn't see eye to eye, is because I was only seeing my side. Right. And when you only see your side, you will never give room to even comprehend what's taking place on the other end.
Absolutely.
That's why I go back to saying marriage is work, because if you don't become intentional on seeing the other side, you will always stay in your side. And your side will always look correct, and your side will always look perfect, and your side will always look like, I'm right, he's wrong, he should have never did what he did. You will always have that lens until you take it off and say, let me go onto the other side so I can see what he's seeing.
Absolutely.
And I think that when you do that, that's the game changer. That's the game changer, right? Going into the other side so you can see what he's seeing and not always look, because I think sometimes we speak to be right, and we speak so that they can hear us, but we never give ear to what they have to say.
Right.
Or we allow them to say something, but we already are thinking of what to say next, because we're not really digesting what they first said.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yes. That is, you hit it right on the head. I think a lot of women are guilty for that. I'm not even women. I think it goes both ways. You're just waiting for that rebuttal. But going back to what you said, Heidi, I'm so happy you brought up this scenario. I think in a lot of cases, family is the number one issues where a lot of couples bump head, and not even just families. When you come in from something from a previous relationship into a new one, and then they're not the person's child, and there's so much to lay out on the table. But one thing that I love what you said, what you did, was you wanted to hear his perspective. You gained understanding to his perspective, and y'all came and y'all found a common ground. And that's what it's all about. It's always about coming to that common ground. I know a few people right now in their marriage, they're just feuding and they're going back and forth and they are not listening to one another. They're just at the point where you got to hear my point. But when do you come back to the table and say, hey, like you said, can we revisit this? Can we really sit down? Can we really come to solving this? Because this has been escalating for so long. And like you said, Heidi, it can be something little to be honest, there's nothing little about that, because the longer you allow it to escalate, it's going to tumble and it's going to fumble and it's going to be a strain on your relationship. But yes, sometimes there are the simple things, but people can't get over those humps because they don't have the necessary skills, like you just set in place with your husband and say, okay, well, how can we resolve this? And can we put this to an end? Because we don't need to go back and forth. You know what I'm trying to say? Because you want to enjoy the beautiful stuff of marriage, not this back and forth and bickering and who's right and who's wrong. And that's my daughter. Ooh, because I know women, we're great, but that's my daughter. Ooh, I gotta say this. And I'm gonna say this from a woman that learned from her experience. Ladies, it is not fair that when you come into the marriage, you know, with kids prior to the marriage, right? They're not your husband's kids. And he is the protector of the family.
Yes.
And then, you know, and your child actually do something and then you throw it in his face. Those are my children. I don't know, right? If you know right there, but right there, you done tore up that whole man's ego. And I don't know if things are going back to be the same, because you will really have to have a serious conversation. Because how are you going to say, well, we're married and we're a blended family, but you got no say so? That's not right. And I can say I did that, you know, so I'm speaking from experience. And one thing I also want to share too from experience that I had in my previous marriage. I remember one time my husband put me to the side. He said, hey, let me say something to you. He was like, I noticed that, you know, whenever your mother want to take your son, you know, he just goes, and I don't know. I'm in the dark, and I don't know that things are happening in the household, and we live together. He said, so I want to put something in perspective to you. And I said, okay, I'm listening. He said, but what if I had something planned for the family, and I didn't know your son was going with your mom? So now that I had this plan for our family, and when it's time to come, he's not here. And when he put that into perspective to me, it made a lot of sense. I'm like, how I'm in a relationship and I'm bringing single parent mentality into my relationship. And that was one of my biggest aha moments. So any ladies, if you're listening to this, I hope you just take key of this, you know, and how it can affect your spouse, you know, when you bring in that attitude, single parent mentality, and this is my child. If that's the case, what are you married for?
Come on.
What are you married for?
Yes. Yeah.
You feel me?
I love that you said that, because I love that you said that single-minded mentality. And if you're bringing that into what is supposed to be a marriage, it will be very hard to succeed.
Yeah.
Not that it won't be possible. I will tell you this, because sometimes you have to go through a lot of brokenness in order to get perfected, right? The only way something can become beautiful, because I heard when you said that, it rang in my ear. Marriage is a beautiful thing. The only way for it to be beautiful, again, is that it had to have gone through so much pressing, so much brokenness sometimes, because out of that, it's like when they're making the gold, right?
Right.
It has so much pressing.
Yes.
So much so that you can get the refined, you can get the good stuff, right? So it can be a fireproof marriage, right? So sometimes you gotta go through all of that hell so that when the times of trouble come, your marriage can stand, because you've been through all of that. Absolutely. Right? So I won't lie and sit here and tell you, you know, that a marriage won't succeed if it's starting off like that. I will tell you that because nothing's impossible for God, and he works in marriages. He works in the constitution of marriage, the institution he put together. You can get perfected in marriage. You can learn. So, you know what I mean? When me and my husband got together, I was broken. I was broken.
Mm.
And parts of me want to say he was broken as well, because he had his past, I had my past. And one of the things when I think about the marriage, a marriage made in Eden, the way God intended it, it's at the same time you can look at it as two people still being broken, coming together.
Absolutely.
Right? And when the Bible says that he's making them one flesh, but he's taking your brokenness, he's taking his brokenness, but when he's putting it together for his glory.
Absolutely.
So he's going to work something great. But again, it's going to require that intentionality part. It's going to require, like you stated before, commitment,
yes,
dedication. And that's heavy work. That's more work than your 9 to 5. That's not like you checked in, because you go to work, you check out at 5 o'clock, you're done for the day. Marriage, not so. Right? Marriage is ongoing. Marriage is being intentional. Marriage is picking up the phone at 2 o'clock. Hey, babe, even if you don't feel to do that, but you're like, hey, babe, I was just thinking about you.
Yes. And I like that you said, even when you don't feel like it. I think a lot of people might get complacent in their relationship.
Yeah.
And that can help, bring stagnation along. So you also got to do things for yourself to say, hey, I don't feel like it. Let me still show him that I care. Let me still show her that I care. Let me let her know that I'm thinking about her. Send her a little texty gif, flirt with one another. And then I understand sometimes you might have to kick it up a notch and do something different, because guess what? Doing the same thing over and over, it gets boring. And I'm pretty sure throughout 15 years of marriage, it's like, all right, let's do something different because I'm bored now. And the thing is having fun. That's the key thing. This is why it says in the word, be a babe, because you understand when children are little, they just have fun, So I feel like we kind of have to have that spirit, that fun spirit. I understand we are adults and we have responsibilities, but that's because you're an adult, you have responsibility. It does not mean you cannot enjoy yourself. One, enjoy yourself, because it starts with you first, and then enjoy your spouse. That's a double whammy right there.
Yes. This is true.
I'm sorry. Again, I just think sometimes it leaves after a certain while because of stagnation.
Yes, exactly. Right. So you want to be creative, because you want to, make sure that you're attending to his needs and vice versa. Right. Two-way street. He's attending to your needs. He has to do what he needs to do. She needs to do what she needs to do. Because you want to stay in love. Right. You don't want to you don't want to just be like, I love you because I love you because you're my husband or you're my wife. But you want it to be like, I really love you. Like I'm in love with you. Like I desire you. I'm attracted to you, and those are things that it can go away again. But this is why you have to be intentional in your marriage.
Right.
I those that I say, you know what, you want to keep your husband, your spouse, you want to keep him happy. You want to keep him, on target with the marriage, then you have to do what you need to do as a woman. Right. And sometimes that's going to look like, doing things that, he may like that maybe you had not considered even before in your marriage. Right. You know what I'm trying to say? Because you want to be able to bring to the table his needs, as long as he's also providing your needs, because it has to be a mutual exchange. That's what marriage is all about. Mutual and coming together.
Absolutely. And also too, I also have to say this. It also puts you in a position to be you're transitioning from selfish to selfless. That is something that you have to keep in mind too. And a lot of us don't realize we are selfish people. It's by default. We're selfish, but once you come into an awareness, then you can shift. You can shift at any time, because then you're going to understand, like you said, you know what? I haven't done what she wanted in a while. I haven't done what he wanted in a while. Let me just put the emphasis on them and make them happy. And also too, you can even put that emphasis on your kids, because sometimes when you're in routine of they coming home and you cooking dinner and they eating and you're doing homework and then it's bedtime, that ain't fun. but we understand that's the Monday through Friday stuff, but and those Saturdays, make those time. And I think this is why, I help women in business. I help them to get back to their family time, because sometimes we understand we're in the grind. It takes time from the family. And I'm like, no, I need you to be in your house because you matter. Mom, you matter. Husband, you matter. But my key thing is that what my ministry is, I work with women because I have to educate them. Listen, you matter in the home. Your presence is needed in the home.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
those are my 2 cents. Heidi, before we leave, because we're running out of time, what is something that you would like to leave with the audience?
I think something that I did want to share as it pertains to the marriage is also for both men and women to understand. I know we always, we read it in the Bible, the two shall become one, right?
Yeah.
But a woman needs to understand that she is already a woman and a whole woman by herself. Because if she goes into a marriage thinking that the man is going to complete her, that's going to be a problem. So I suggest and I recommend to every woman who is not married that they understand first that they are whole all by themselves.
Yes.
That they are enough all by themselves, right? Because once they can master that and know that, when they go into marriage, they're not going to be depending on somebody else to bring them fulfillment, because fulfillment won't come from the spouse. Fulfillment comes from God. So I think that that's something I would love to leave with the women, that they understand that they are whole.
Yes.
Even if God makes them whole.
Amen. Listen, when you said that, I wanted to jump out my seat and run around the room and say, "Thank you, God, I received that." That right there, I kid you not, Heidi, it is so important. I kid you not, because that just goes back to diverting that you own your own happiness. Nobody else can make you happy. You have to own that. So again, it's you that's going into that marriage, and you're bringing a piece of you, he's bringing a piece of him, and that's where the one comes together. And that's it. And that's God right there. God created that. He was like, I know you and I know you. And y'all gonna be beautiful together, but y'all just gonna have to work this out. But Heidi, I thank you so much. Before we leave, tell the audience a little bit about what you do and how they can follow you and stay in contact with you.
Absolutely. So I am a pastor. My husband and I both, we are a pastor of House of Freedom Worship Center. We are a church outside of the four walls. We also do Bible classes. We do leadership classes. That's something that I'm definitely big on. I teach women how to lead effectively. Amen. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, you can visit me on my website, www.imrise.org. You can follow me on social media on Facebook by my name, Heidi Mercado. Also on Instagram. I'm not really so big on Instagram, but I am in there. And you can also find me on Instagram on IamRise777.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for listening tonight. I hope me and Heidi was able to help you get some insight. I hope you can change your mind, whatever you and your spouse is going through. And you were like, hey, because Heidi and Kalima talked about this, we need to sit down and have conversation. And that's what it's all about. If that was happened, we did our job. We did our job. And that's all right. That we want to make sure that we just continue to give that godly love, that kingdom love. And we want you to be successful within your relationship. So we thank you. Continue to follow us here at the Lady K Chat podcast. And next week and the following week, after this whole month of March, we'll be laying out, how to resolve, conflict resolutions within your relationship, so you can have a successful relationship and you can have a happy family. So God bless everyone. Have a great night. And thank you so much. And come back next Tuesday here at 6 p.m.
Lady K.